Hello, everyone. I am Thomas Farley, Mr. Manners, and this, of course, is the What Matters Most podcast. I am joined by my producer, Martin Burgess. Welcome, Martin.
Hi.
Martin, today we're going to be talking about something very serious, something that is just inescapable in the headlines, and I think today, of all days, at least so far in this epidemic, of course, it's Corona that I'm referring to, has just been a day of remarkable numbers of cancellations and restrictions. Disneyland, we just have learned, is going to be closing down indefinitely. The NBA is suspending its season. March Madness is not happening. New York City may be going on some kind of, we're in an emergency. We may be going on some sort of work at home required situation in the coming days. It's been a really unprecedented, for those of, I think the last time the United States experienced anything like this was 1918 with the Spanish flu. But
were you here for those days?
I was born the year after, okay. So yes, I've only heard about it from my older siblings. But no, I think this is truly unprecedented territory, and concerning and alarming. And you were even commenting, being out on the streets, it felt like a hurricane was on the way.
Yeah, here in New York, we've had several hurricanes over the last decade. There's this energy of panic where people are in the supermarkets trying to stock up on whatever they can, and it feels like there's a disaster coming. Nothing's going to get destroyed, but something's happening.
I totally agree. Lining up outside my neighborhood Trader Joe's today were at least 100 people waiting just to get into the store. So you can only imagine what the store itself was like. And there's, not defeated, but this panicked and kind of shell-shocked looks, I guess is probably the best adjective I can use, on the faces of the pedestrians who are in disbelief that something that is on the tip of everyone's tongues and on the top of everyone's minds a week and a half or 2 weeks ago was not even a blip of consideration, has suddenly now ramifications beyond what any of us ever imagined, from school closures to work at home situations to, as you say, empty grocery store shelves to all sorts of travel restrictions. We are living in a brand new era, one I hope does not last for the indefinite future, but one that is clearly going to be with us for quite some time.
It's new territory, and I think people are mostly concerned because it's not, unlike a hurricane which is going to come hit us alone. Italy has shut down completely, and they have said, we were you 2 weeks ago. So we have someone telling us what's about to happen.
That's right.
So I think that's what's causing most of the concern.
And I think even on a local level here in New York, you, I believe, were here during September 11th.
I was not.
You weren't. Okay. So I was here working in Midtown at the time, and it was a very frightening and awful thing that happened. And there was uncertainty even in the days following as people were sorting out, is this our new normal? What does this mean? And yet we were talking about a fairly singular event with the multiple part attack that happened on New York and DC and on Pennsylvania, that we felt we were able to take immediate action and begin what was, of course, a very long healing process. With this, there are just so many unknowns. We're facing a foe that lurks around every corner in some senses. And although I don't want to fan the flames of fear, I think there are legitimate reasons for these precautions and for the concern, particularly when it comes to the health of the elderly or anyone who has a compromised immune system. Why these restrictions, as draconian as they may feel and as severely damaging as they are, obviously, to our economy, that they are necessary precautionary steps.
Yeah, absolutely, because like in Italy, who's almost paving the way for us now. We're looking at them and how they're handling it. They're now at the point where they have to decide who lives and dies because they simply don't have the space and the resources in the hospitals to treat people. And they're not as big as America, so that's going to be a huge problem when that happens here.
Yeah.
And so take it seriously.
Take it seriously, and hopefully, fingers crossed, it is not a case of when it happens here. Let's hope it's more a case of if. With that said, we obviously do have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. But it was within that realm that I thought, I'm not an MD. I am not a psychologist, but what I hope always to bring to any conversation is the importance of kindness, of consideration, of thoughtfulness. And I think in a time of crisis such as we're in now, these traits and these actions take on a whole greater significance than they would in normal times. And you, Martin, were sharing with me a story right before the podcast about something fairly interesting that I thought that recently happened in your kickboxing class.
So I take kickboxing regularly, and it's a very casual style of kickboxing. You don't have to wear the uniform and all that mess. But however, after the first warm-up, the instructor always likes to go around and high-five everybody. It's just like a thing that they do there. And so for the first time, I put my hands away and said, not today, especially after touching everybody, because you don't know.
Yes.
He took it personally and got really offended and made this huge announcement to the class about how they're sanitizing everything and the place is clean. No one has symptoms in here. But in my mind, someone could have been infected in here and you have no idea. So it was really about protecting myself, and yet he took it personally.
Well, and I just want to point out, for those who don't know you, you are one of the most considerate people I know, and I think some of that is in your DNA as being an Aussie. And
Maybe.
I think in general, you are just considerate beyond even anybody's most outrageous expectations. So the fact that this is something that you felt was important for you to not partake in, that high five, I think that obviously says a lot about the point where we are, that even someone who's as considerate as you are taking those sorts of precautions.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be smart, protect yourself. When I was a kid, I was traveling to Peru for the first time. My mother's from there. And I always remember my doctor saying, because Peru was a third world country, it still had older diseases that don't exist in Australia. So my doctor said to me, if you're on a bus and someone's coughing next to you, don't be polite. Get up and move, because that could be tuberculosis. It could be something really serious that you're just not even immune to and your body can't handle. So don't worry about etiquette. Yes. Move, get away and protect yourself first in that situation.
I would concur with that advice. I would say it's all in the delivery. So in this case, if you were departing your square foot of space for a different square foot of space on a bus, I would do so without a heavy sigh, without an eye roll, without a dirty look at the person who, clearly, and we've all been there. We've all had whether bronchitis or some kind of a cough or a cold, and feeling, oh gosh, you're trying to hold it in and your face is turning purple, and suddenly there's nothing more that you can do. This is an involuntary response. I think we can all empathize with what that's like. So yes, I fully agree. And this may be a case of not just keeping yourself healthy, but you could be especially in the case of corona, you could be infected, not showing any symptoms, and actually infect someone else, especially someone older, who then is dealing with the consequences of you wanting to be polite and not offending the person who is sick on the bus standing next to you.
Exactly.
So I think all around, the cautions, I think, are a positive thing. But there's also a way to be cautious and a way that is still considerate. And that's my hope of what we can emerge from this conversation today, giving people some concrete tips on how to navigate what is our new normal. Again, I hope it's not our new normal for long, but we may be in this for the long haul. So how can we maintain contact with our humanity while we're avoiding contact with humans?
Yeah, well, you have to keep in mind this isn't the zombie apocalypse. It's not the end of the world. Most of us are going to survive even if we get it, and we have to deal with each other afterwards. So it's not the time to get rude and savage and crazy in the supermarket.
That's right. And I think the flip side of that is not to get rude and offended because somebody feels that for whatever reason they are taking precautions that you think they're being a hypochondriac. We need to respect all sensibilities. So if you feel, oh, that's silly, let's hug it out, or, oh my gosh, don't be such a prude, let's shake hands, we've known each other for years, I'm not sick, you're not sick, what's the problem? We really need to be very respectful. Also being mindful that people are feeling anxious right now, and they may be taking steps that might be seemingly a little bit extreme. But if that's the headspace that they're in, then we as their friends, their coworkers, their acquaintances, we must respect that.
Yeah, because maybe that person lives with grandma and grandpa, or they're going to see them tomorrow, or, mom's old.
That's right.
You don't know what's at home for them, so they're just taking extra steps.
Absolutely. And I will say, with all of these cancellations, and I think I can speak for most listeners, and Martin, I know you as well, the number of conferences, theme parks, Broadway now closed, which means we're going to be seeing a whole lot more of our inner circle
Yeah.
and our immediate family, our close friends, our neighbors, which underscores all the more why we've got to be considerate.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've developed an acronym which encapsulates what I believe to be the 4 key components of an effective strategy for all of us to be able to be thoughtful with the people around us during this particular time of crisis. And so the acronym is C.A.R.E, C-A-R-E.
Easy to remember.
Easy to remember. That's what I strive for. And so the C in care is going to stand for considerate. And on that realm of being considerate, one of the things that I think we all need to have an extra consciousness of is what it is to cancel. So if you are canceling on a small gathering that you had said you were going to be going to, if you were canceling on a work function that you were going to be going to, there needs to be an exhaustive amount of consideration on the part of both parties. So if you are the individual being canceled on, I think you need to be understanding and, in fact, grateful, particularly if the person is sick. But even if the person is not sick, we need to have an extra measure of consideration and know that we are living in uncharted times and not to get upset because somebody is canceling on you, providing that person, and this is where the guest plays a role, providing that the guest is provided as much notice as possible about their inability to join for an occasion, because we know whether it's a small gathering or even a mid-sized gathering or a big work commitment, the amount of work and preparation that go into pulling people together. And I think for somebody to cancel at the last minute just because they're not feeling it, I think is inconsiderate when they could have communicated that sooner. So if you are invited to something and you have something on your calendar that you feel you're simply not going to be able to attend for whatever reason, let your host know as soon as possible.
Like a day in advance?
I would say this as soon as you know it. If it's a week off, I would let them know today.
Okay.
So, even if you're feeling perfectly healthy, I'd far rather, because this is going to enable the host to do a bunch of things. It's going to allow the host to make a determination. You know what? We're still a week out, and I've already had 4 people cancel on my gathering of 9 people. Maybe I should reschedule, and I can still go give the people who believe they're still attending ample notice about the cancellation. And this also allows them perhaps to replenish the guest list with some who wouldn't mind coming. And I'm talking about, you may be thinking, well, who in the world is throwing dinner parties while the world is in crisis? Well,
Birthday parties?
birthday parties,
Yeah.
and frankly, dinner parties. I feel like if ever there were a time for small gatherings, I think it's now. I think you take precautions, and we're going to talk about that too. But simply becoming pariahs where we're all living in an encased bubble and don't see anyone in our lives for the foreseeable future, as human beings, I don't think that's a tenable situation. I think we need to have social distancing, yes, but still thoughtful interactions, and where possible, those smaller, less grandiose gatherings, I think, are what's going to help pull us through.
Do you mean right now, or should we wait till it's actually here and moving through the city?
So, well, of course, we've got a listenership that's around the country and around the world. So you want to be very, very aware of what's happening in your particular community. And certainly if your state or your city or your town has issued any kind of a quarantine and you are not allowed to leave your home, or it's highly recommended that you don't show up for work, that is going to take precedence. I think even with the number of cases today, and I think we stand at about 1,500 cases diagnosed in the United States as of today, as of this particular broadcast, and we know that's only poised to increase. We're still a country of 300 million people. So the fact that you feel that of the 1,500 cases that we know about that have been tested for means that every other person on the sidewalk is carrying it, and you need to run away kicking and screaming from that individual because they might get you sick. I think that would be an overreach unless you live in a particularly heavily hit community. But you may live in a community where there are 0 diagnosed cases, or a state where there are only a small handful of cases. And I think, yes, cautious, yes, mindfulness, but to avoid all human contact in those particular environments.
Okay.
Again, I'm not a doctor, but I think that would be overly restrictive on ourselves to be depriving ourselves of that considerate human contact when it's not quite necessary in those communities.
Okay. That makes more sense.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the clarification. And again, being in New York, where I know hyper aware of it, where you can't walk out your door without feeling at least the stigma and the fear and the anxiety on the faces of everybody, as we said earlier, just like a hurricane, except a hurricane that would be hitting us seemingly every single day without end.
Yeah. Actually, so when I was actually coming here, I was walking down Columbus Avenue. This woman across the street was coughing, was a deep, raspy cough. I just turned down the street.
Yes.
I went the other direction. Didn't even go near her. My etiquette was good because I didn't roll my eyes. I just pretended I was going that way anyway.
Your doctor back in Sydney would be so proud of you.
He would. He just moved.
Yes. My lessons have lasted all these years. Well done. Yeah. And you know what? I think, again, looking at this from a 360 degree perspective, it is no fun to be that person on the sidewalk who's coughing, because you know what everybody's thinking. And you may know, oh gosh, I always get a tickle at 3:00 every day if I haven't had my glasses of water.
Yeah.
And now everybody's looking at me like, oh my gosh, this person has corona or worse. I get it. So let's just be as considerate as possible. Again, there are plenty of personal hygiene habits that are voluntary. And when somebody doesn't remain mindful of those habits, chewing too loud or, spitting on the street, these are hygiene habits that are fully within our control and that are not excusable. But somebody who is coughing, providing they are taking all proper precaution to do the Dracula and actually cough into their elbow, not cough into their hand, certainly cover your mouth, even if you're out on the sidewalk, because you never know who might be walking behind you. We can't blame someone for coughing. They don't want to cough any more than you want to be coughed on. But by the same token, they shouldn't take offense if we suddenly, instead of giving them 6 feet of birth, we're suddenly giving them 600 feet of birth.
Yeah. Now this is filed under considerate.
Yes.
If you're coughing, you cover your mouth. You try to limit the spread of the germs.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Got it.
So you're doing all those things, and then again, if for whatever reason you decide to cancel, you're being considerate in those cancellations and giving your host as much notice as possible.
Okay.
So that's C. So A is you're going to be accommodating. So now this is for hosts. So if you are fortunate enough and everybody's feeling healthy and everybody's great and there are no restrictions in your community and you decide to have a small gathering, again, we are people who need people, and we need people probably more so than ever in this kind of a scenario, especially if it's a trusted circle. There are some things that you can do as a host to be accommodating to the general comfort and hygiene of those who are going to be coming to your home. So things such as having disposable hand towels. Most of us don't have blow dryers for drying your hands like you would in a public washroom, but having, and you can have nice ones that are monogrammed with your initial on them, whatever suits your fancy. But rather than having that kind of well-worn, damp terry cloth, washcloth, or hand towel as the sole source of people drying their hands, which, by the way, this is a throwback, that tradition is a throwback to, do you know, Martin, I don't know if you realize this. So napkins in the Middle Ages were not a common practice. There was one giant sheet that would hang on the wall. And in between courses while you were eating your mead and drinking and so forth, you would just casually walk up to this towel that would hang on the wall, and you'd wipe your hands and wipe your mouth from this communal piece of fabric that was hanging there for everyone's use. So although we know probably some people in our lives who don't make ample use of a napkin in the way that they should, just think about our modern day equivalent of the Middle Ages using that communal napkin on the wall is 10 guests in your home
Yeah.
using the same terry cloth towel to dry their hands after washing.
Cue in the Black Plague.
In the Black Plague.
This is where she comes in.
Exactly, yes. So we certainly don't want to return to that. So
Paper towels.
Paper towels. Nice disposable hand guest towels is definitely the way to go.
Okay.
So that is number one. The second thing that a host can do is to have, if you can find it, if you've been able to find it in a source and you haven't been price gouged to buy it, have some hand sanitizer available for your guests who are clearly having to touch other surfaces prior to their arrival in your home. This is a great means of keeping all your guests safe and healthy, and of course them and your household safe and healthy as well. And if you cannot find the hand sanitizer, what you can find are all sorts of homemade recipes. So think not just about the recipe and the dishes that you're going to be creating, but perhaps think about the hand sanitizer that you're going to be creating for the guests who are coming into your home.
And if you are the guest, as you may have observed earlier, Tom, come in and wash your hands straight away. First thing you do.
Absolutely. The first thing on your arrival. And I'm seeing this more and more. I don't know if you witnessed it, Martin, at all for you. I'm seeing more and more stores where when you arrive, first thing, there is a sign right up front and they've actually got a wash basin and either sanitizer or some kind of bath soaps, hand soaps that will allow you to wash your hands before you even transact any business in the store, which I think, again, is a good condition. But certainly you're walking into someone's home, 100%. It also leads me to say, I think it's important to think about what you bring as a guest walking into someone's home. And not that it needs to be your only gift, but I think a nice hostess gift coming to somebody's home can be a bottle of hand sanitizer, maybe even some homemade, put it in a nice bottle, tied up with a nice ribbon.
It's rare these days.
That's right. It's
a luxury item now.
It's a luxury item that is definitely in high demand.
Yeah.
So this is our way of being accommodating as a host. Our third of our letters in the acronym C.A.R.E is to be reasonable. So with respect to being reasonable, this is where we start thinking about greetings. And I know it's just amazing to me when I think of some of these traditions being so long-standing, especially the handshake. The handshake has been a constant in the way we interact with one another in Western civilization since the days of the ancient Egyptians. You can actually find hieroglyphs that have ancient Egyptians shaking hands with one another. This is an opportunity for one person to show to another that they were unarmed. And that's where the handshake comes from. It's why we now use it to signal a greeting, signal friendship, signal a deal being done. So the handshake has been around forever. And I feel like in the span of 2 weeks, it's been
canceled.
It's been canceled. Handshakes have been canceled. So what's risen up to take the place of the handshake? Because I think for many of us, and I am certainly one of them, and Martin, you are too, warm, friendly, engaging people. I am not standoffish with others. I love being around other people. So what has emerged as some alternatives? Some I think a little bit goofy, some kind of interesting.
Yeah, we're beta testing.
We are beta testing. And you know what's great, frankly? I don't know if you've tried some of these. What's great is I think it's an opportunity to challenge ourselves, to learn something new, and to make the best of an obviously negative situation by being unafraid to laugh at ourselves, being unafraid to feel a little bit vulnerable in an interactive kind of a way. So some of the things that I've seen crop up as alternatives to the handshake in a couple of weeks. And I'm wondering if you've tried any of these or seen any of these, Martin.
I'm sticking to the wave.
You like the wave.
Keep your corona over there. I'll keep mine over here.
Yes.
We'll just wave at each other.
Okay. So this is the across the room wave. What's so normal North American standing and speaking distance. So say you're at a networking reception or you're having a conversation with someone who's not someone that is a significant other is 3 feet, which tends to be one person's arm length. That's
okay. I was going to say one arm.
Yes, exactly. That's if you're standing any farther than that under normal circumstances, which these are not normal circumstances. Any farther than that in Western civilization, you are seen as standoffish. Any closer than that 3 feet, where you close that gap off, you're that quintessential close talker. Now, this is different in other cultures. So
you're talking about people I don't really know. Which is associates, acquaintances?
This could be a friend, this could be a family member, or it could be somebody that you've just met for the first time. 3 feet in general is where we stand to establish a buffer zone of comfort between those two individuals that doesn't feel unnecessarily intimate, that you're standing closer than that, or that you are uninterested by standing farther away than that. So that's a general rule. Again, if it's someone that you're intimate with, different story. But somebody who you're not intimate with, that 3 feet is about the buffer zone that we all need for our own personal space in North America. It's different in some Asian cultures where that distance is much narrower than the 3 feet, or it's actually bigger in some Nordic countries, for example, and countries in Northern Europe, where the population is far less dense. And as a result, the expectation and the need for greater personal space would actually exceed 3 feet. But now the experts are telling us 6 feet is what you want to do.
Fine.
Social distancing. You're fine. You're fine with 60 feet. Yeah. You're crossing the street, and you're doing that in your own apartment. You're crossing the street. So let's face it. Sometimes that's not going to be practical. 6 feet, but if you were greeting someone, so your default is the wave from across the room. So that's,
for now, we're just changing things up a little bit.
That's right.
That's all.
That's for today. Tomorrow
Yes.
maybe is something different.
A hazmat suit tomorrow.
Right, exactly. And then by Saturday you're on the first flight to Mars.
I've had a nervous breakdown by Saturday.
So I think I love the options.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I think probably the most popular option that we've been hearing about is what's sometimes referred to as the Ebola elbow, which is the elbow bump, rather the thinking being that your elbows are probably less germ contaminated surfaces than your hands are, which are touching everything, including your face, including your mouth, including perhaps covering your sneeze if you're not doing the Dracula. So the elbow touch.
I'm sorry, the Dracula?
The Dracula, yes. So the Dracula is the idea that you sneeze into your elbow, not into your hand.
Oh, like the Count?
Yes. So
the Dracula. Oh, I get it. The cape.
Yes.
Got it.
So you've got the visual. So
Yes.
the idea being that you're kind of drawing back your Dracula cape, and in front of you comes your elbow right in front of your mouth, and you're coughing there. It's known as the Dracula move.
Okay.
Yes. So if you're not doing the elbow bump, though, and I find, frankly, for me, especially in business, I find that the fist bump is a little bit too bro-y for business, along with a high five, which works for a boxing class under normal circumstances, but probably not for business. We've also seen the foot shake.
I feel like the fist bump is too close to the germy palm, so keep it away.
I agree. And I've seen some studies on this. I know there are fewer germs that are carried on a fist than are on the palm itself, but you're absolutely right.
Too close.
You're still making hand contact.
Yeah.
And these coronavirus germs, from what we understand, are fairly mobile viruses and pretty hardy. So if you're not comfortable doing the across the room wave, or if the fist pump feels a little bit too dicey for you.
But you must have physical contact.
But you must have the physical contact. You insist on the physical contact. A few other options I've seen out there. Jimmy Kimmel had, I thought, a very creative one that he calls the hellobo, where you actually touch your opposing elbows. So my right elbow to your right elbow, and then immediately followed by your left elbow to my left elbow.
Okay.
So kind of doing a crisscross across the body.
All right.
Again, you're doubling potentially your chance at an elbow germ exchange by doing 2 elbows rather than just one.
Take the risk.
Take the risk if you're so inclined. And the one that I think does require a lot of core strength and coordination is the foot shake.
Okay.
Where rather than shaking hands, you're actually lifting your right foot in the air, meeting mid-air, the raised right foot of the person opposite you, meeting at about the side or the arch of the foot, and you're kind of up and down together.
Locking arches?
Locking arches,
Okay.
and raising your feet up and down in the air a couple times before replacing your feet to their starting position.
Shoe on or off?
Shoe on.
Okay,
Yes.
this sounds more hygienic to me.
Definitely more hygienic because, hopefully you are not then touching your own shoes.
Yes.
Which, of course, we know our shoes hold all sorts of germs. But shoe to shoe should be less of a concern than hand to hand for certain. It does require some coordination, I've got to say. I've tried it. It feels awkward, and I wouldn't initiate that with somebody who you didn't think could balance on one foot.
Okay.
Because this could end badly if the person winds up falling over because they can't
And then you grab
maintain
each
their
other, and
balance.
now you've touched each other.
Right,
This
exactly.
sounds risky.
And then you're going to the hospital for a whole other reason. A couple more ways of dealing with the greeting component of this. If you haven't tried these already, I love the Namaste Greeting, where you put your hands together as if in prayer and give a slight bow
A classic.
toward one another. This is a classic.
Yeah.
Another great way to approach this, I feel, is hand over heart, right hand over heart, with the left hand gestured out but not reaching out. So a sign of humility. Anytime we put our hands over our heart, as we do when we're pledging allegiance to a flag, for example, is a sign of humility and happiness about being in the presence of an individual across from you, which is a sign of respect. I also, as a Star Trek fan, I do love the Mr. Spock greeting, the Vulcan greeting, where you actually put your hand in the air and you do the live long and prosper.
Okay.
This works only if the other person happens to know Star Trek or care. But if you both are Trekkies, I think that's a great way. Who knew Mr. Spock was going to be giving us something that could help us with coronavirus spread prevention
Yes.
all those years ago. So these, anyway, I think are all means of us being that much more considerate with the people around us. Does not mean that you simply, out of awkwardness, decide you're not going to greet anybody in any fashion and you're just going to walk in and be an automaton. Still be friendly, still be engaging. But now I think we've got plenty of ways. And in fact, I'm sure in the coming weeks, even new ways of greeting one another will emerge.
Yeah.
So next up, I think it's essential that we are responsible. And we've kind of touched on this a lot in the conversation that we've been having. But if you are sick, stay home. Stay home from work. Cancel those social gatherings, those plans that you've made. You are doing the greatest disservice to anybody thinking you're not being there is going to upset the people that you're not with.
I don't want you there.
I don't want you there either. Stay home. And this goes for everything besides just corona. You know, maybe you have something else.
Flu.
Maybe you have the flu, or maybe you have a bad cold that you've been grappling with. Yes, I love you. Yes, I care about your well-being. Obviously, you wouldn't have been invited to my gathering if I didn't want you there. But I certainly, for two reasons.
Change my mind.
Yeah, changed my mind. Invite rescinded. No, I want you as your friend. I want you to get better as rapidly as possible. And you pushing yourself to come out, especially if it's a cold evening, is not going to get you better faster.
Yeah.
And certainly it's going to put my home and my other guests at risk. So do the responsible thing. Don't lay a guilt trip on yourself thinking that you must be there. If you're not feeling well, stay home. And last but not least, in our C.A.R.E scenario, is we want to remain educated. And by this, I mean, and not overdoing it, feeling like you need to be glued to the TV all day long, which I think is probably going to be a condition for all of us as more of us are working from home. We're going to be closer to our TVs and we're going to be wanting the latest and greatest information, which is important to have, but that we don't become so obsessed by it that we feel paralyzed to live our lives as best we can as we pull together. But yes, remain educated. So know what's going on in your community, know when the outbreaks have started, know if there are restrictions such as visiting nursing homes and staying away from nursing homes and being very, very respectful of those new restrictions and regulations that are put into place as we all as a country, as a culture, and as a globe deal with the consequences of what this all means. So that education, I think, is very important, and it empowers all of the other C.A.R.E that we spoke about.
Yeah, you know, like always in most situations, knowledge is the most powerful tool that we have. So once we learn more about it and figure out how it's actually spreading, how to prevent it, learn different techniques like we have today, very informative, I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah, I know we're going to be okay if we pull together. And I'm so glad you talked about spreading the knowledge, because I think equally important for all of us is to make sure that the knowledge that we may be spreading is from a correct source. And so that means that if you are sharing information, we're doing this in not a, oh, guess what I just heard from a headline for a story that I didn't actually read type of source, but rather that we are sharing as we all learn and we all have the opportunity to become and be newsbreakers in a very vital way, that we make sure that the veracity of the information we're sharing with others is not incorrect, is not misleading, and that it is based on factual information coming from informed sources. So I think as we are all communicators, whether on social media, whether on the phone, through text, that we are doing so from an informed, educated standpoint and not spreading around rumors or misinformation, because that certainly doesn't help the cause.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, as I did say earlier, we are all in this together, and I really appreciate your listening. I have a feeling, and I wish this weren't the case, but I have a feeling that this is going to be a topic on this podcast that we will be returning to at least periodically, if not regularly. So if you do have Corona-related etiquette questions, please let us know, because again, this is new territory. If you have things that have worked particularly well for you, greetings that you've tried that are working out well for you, I'd love to hear what they might be. Or if there are things that you wish people knew that you feel that they are not hearing or seeing based on your experiences, we'd love to hear that as well. And you can send all of those questions and more to the podcast through our website, which is whatmannersmost.com, and then go over to the contact page and let us know what's on your mind. So, Martin, thank you again for the conversation.
No, thank you, and stay safe.
Yes. So all of our listeners, please stay informed, stay considerate, stay healthy, and thank you again for joining us on the podcast where we explore the things that matter most.